All right, so you get the drill, right? This is what we're doing today. And we've had a pretty serious disruption to the workplace over the past 3 years. So I'm going to make the greatest attempt to make HR fun for you as we talk about some of the challenging things that workplaces have gone through. So, Michael, do we have information about the app on people's phone and how they're going to be voting on the directions?
So what we're going to do is we're going to go to, and I'll grab the microphone here for a second. Here's the very simple technical. You're going to get your phone. You're going to go to your browser on your phone. You're going to go to menti.com. So menti, menti.com. And you're going to enter the following number. I'll read it out. 14539042. So again, we're going to menti.com, and the code is 14539042. And we're going to pause for a second, Karen, because we need people to load that on their phones before it starts. Oh, you're voting. Oh, my God. Okay. So just give us if you're loaded and you're voting already, put up your hands. Okay, good. Anyone having problems with it? Menti, menti.com, and the number is right up there, and it's going to stay up there.
All right, thank you. So, first question is, what do you think of hybrid work? Look at the numbers going for loving the PJs. How's that going to change workplace policies around dress code? What's that going to do for the retail industry when we're all working in our PJs? Are we going to have a startup about PJs? Is that what's going on? All right. How much time do we have for voting? We're good? All right, so working in our PJs is the way to go over the pandemic and beyond. One of the things that we are seeing now is that workplaces are really taking into consideration those dress code policies. And we're starting to see a lot of flexibility on that, and also making sure that employees feel comfortable in the workplace when they're coming into the office as well as at home. They're starting to take a look at some of the extra spending accounts that they're putting on top of benefits programs. And so leisure wear is one of the top rated benefits that people are into. So hello, Lululemon, and all of those other casual ones. All right, let's go to the next one. Get ready, get your voting set. Companies are doing mass firings by email. What's your take on that? All right, so we've got, it sucks, but sometimes it's necessary. It's cruel and unusual punishment. It's plain dumb. There's always a better way. And I don't like it, but I love the efficiency. All right, so while you're voting, we've got a mic that's going to circulate. And I'd like people to share, maybe not identifying the organization, but sharing some of the interesting stories that you've either experienced or your colleagues, family members might have experienced with this kind of thing. We all know the movie Up in the Air with George Clooney, those kinds of terminations. What have you seen throughout the pandemic about that? Maybe we'll get the mic circulating while we're letting the vote happen. It's plain dumb. There's always a better way. There's most certainly always a better way. Can I invite someone up to the mic or to stand up? Oh, great, we've got someone. All right, so what's your story?
Hi, so yeah, my name's Kyle. I'm an employment lawyer at Macmillan.
Oh boy. Uh-oh. Get ready, he might be here a while.
I've got a million of these stories, and I won't come anywhere near identifying the people I'm talking about. But suffice to say that honestly, it's not just plain dumb, but Ontario courts have increasingly said this, and there are a couple of recent decisions from in the last, say, 6 months, where employers have been hit with general or punitive damages because of the quote-unquote callous way that a termination has been handled. That doesn't necessarily mean that the employers in question were bad companies or intended to be hurtful. One of them is I think was a large bank. They have capable, talented, and experienced HR people, but sometimes it's really, really easy to fall into the trap of just doing it the way you've always done it. And you pull out your form termination letter and you pull out your calculator and you plug in the numbers and you plug in the language and the employee's data, and for whatever reason, something goes wrong. Some minor mistake gets made that is not intentional at all. But in the eyes of somebody who's just been turfed from like a 15-year job, it's going to look intentional. And in the eyes of their lawyer, it is intentional because that's how they get paid. So be careful. It is just plain dumb. Double check. Don't just dot the I's and cross the T's. Read the documents several times over, or better yet, call your lawyer.
Good advice. Good advice. Yeah. Anybody else see some of this happen? Interesting ways of terminating? We've got one over here.
I'll give you an example. It's a family member early on in the pandemic, unfortunately, lost their job in this method. So they received an email that there would be a company-wide Teams type of call later in the week at a certain day, a couple days notice, and about 10 minutes before that call, a certain percentage, I think it was about 5% of the workforce, received an email that your job is no longer existing. And then again, during that conference call, actually I think it was definitely a closed webinar type of no room for interaction. They were advised that yes, a certain percentage of the workforce has been, their jobs have been eliminated. And what ended up happening is this family member and many others noticed immediately that it was the top performers, and also some, of course, understandably, some that had been in their careers for a long time, but top performers really didn't make sense. And unfortunately, it was the decision of new managers that had come from abroad and wanted to change the work culture. We're not happy with top performers, and essentially the opposite of what was discussed this morning, not surrounding yourself with the best performers, but instead surrounding yourself with people that are underperforming. So it was really, really a bit of a shock to see that happen now. And this was a company, a US-based company, that's been around for over 100 years and prides itself on apparently treating their staff really well. So I don't know. It's a bit of a shock, but... And I can be specific, but I won't.
Thank you. Talk about a missed opportunity, right? You know, the saying from Maya Angelou, people won't remember what you said, and people won't remember what you did, but people will remember how you made them feel. So terminations, like onboarding, so hiring people and terminating people, are the two most delicate activities any leader or HR practitioner is going to do. And we know this because I've got a team of human resources practitioners, and we do this all day, every day. And how you do it, operational decisions have to happen. Let's hope for the right reasons, not because you don't want to surround yourself by the best and the brightest. Like, that's a little odd to me. But operational decisions happen, and people will understand that, and how you set them up for success is hugely important in that termination process, right? And there's a right way to do it, and there's a wrong way to do it. And really taking the time and having that personal connection and making sure that you've got the resources and supports in place, people will remember that and they'll pay it forward because they'll understand that you had to make a difficult decision for operational reasons in the context at the time, and they'll talk about how they were treated in that termination process. So I've had people call me from 15 years ago and say, wow, you know what, I never, ever have experienced being treated that well. We knew you went above and beyond to support us. That's hugely important People will remember that. So these terminations by email, yeah, it's pretty plain dumb. It's pretty plain dumb. You miss the opportunity to have that connection and really support people. So, any other examples before we move on to the next voting? All right, let's do this. And our next question is, what do you think of electronic monitoring of employees? Let's take a look at what we've got up there. So, absolutely creepy. Absolutely creepy. Can't let the slackers slack. Depends on how you're spying on your team. You know, there's good ways and bad ways to spy on your team. We've always done it, so just move on. Oh my gosh, are we gonna get a tie? Are we gonna get a tie here, folks? Let's see who's gonna win this one. Gosh, these are nasty choices, eh? Between creepy and spying. Aren't they one and the same? All right, we're gonna let this go for a little bit because creepy seems to be up there. Uh-oh, spying's catching up. Oh my gosh, we're gonna have a tie, folks. We got creepy spies. We got a lot of creepy spies in the workplace. That's gonna keep my team gainfully employed, just saying. How many creepy spies can we have in Ottawa? I don't know. What's that? Yeah, well, let's spy on who's doing this. Let's put it to action. Love it. All right, so we got creepy spy situations. Anybody have any examples of some of this electronic monitoring that's going on in the workplace? Any cyber people here? All right.
A long time ago in an organization, it was really a leader in their field, and the leader of this organization just kind of, I don't know, just discovered monitoring. And what they would do is that they would go to their office, shut the door, and actually just keep watching everything that's going on in their organization through the cameras. And they would actually, every time that we would gather around performance reviews or anything that would be related to work, they would already have their decisions and perspective already set based on this monitoring. So it's really, really, the reason I chose this example is to show how actually it's creepy, because it gets you biased. Even if you don't jump into conclusions, you're getting only one dimension of what's going on. And this is really risky for the decision-making process.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, when we're looking at creepy monitoring, right? So what you've just given is an example of different forms of monitoring. So we've got cameras in the workplace, we've got privacy legislation around when you can monitor with cameras and when you can't. There's some very legitimate health and safety reasons to have cameras up. We've got working alone type policies. You've got cameras for safety purposes. We've got an employment lawyer in the audience. And so there's some interesting aspects around how you store that information and where you store that information and for how long you store it. But we've also now got artificial intelligence type of monitoring. So keystroke monitoring. Right? Have you heard people, has anybody got examples of people who say, oh, I know they can watch me when I'm not active on Teams, so every once in a while I walk over and I do this on my keyboard, right? And then they know I'm still alive. Okay.
Actually works for a company that has implemented this keystroke monitoring, and he is, I'll say, junior management. He's done run his own numbers. Since they've put in this keystroke monitoring, productivity has dropped by over 25%.
Right.
Because it's pissed off the employees.
Right.
At end of story.
Right.
It's pissed. They're not going to get these people. That loyalty isn't coming back.
Trust. Right? Our relationships are built upon trust. And when we as employers do things like that, that breach the trust bond, then we get, dare I say it, quiet quitters, right? And that is hugely problematic. So the keystroke monitoring, there's also the ability to, from a cyber perspective, even go in and read what is being typed at any given time. Now, I hope we don't know anybody that's using that, but we know that the capability is there. And also other forms of monitoring, we've got GPS monitoring. So we think about organizations, we deal with organizations in all of the industries, and so we've got some of the trades folks that have GPS monitoring in their vehicles. And they can tell at any given time where somebody is at and what they're doing. And the purpose for installing those bits of technology is really around safety. What if someone goes missing and we worry about a medical emergency and we've got to find them in a vehicle, right? They're off somewhere in the truck. And also when they're scheduling calls for service, they need to kind of monitor how long it takes to do a certain call so they can schedule calls for service. But when people start going in and using that technology for reasons that are not a bona fide occupational requirement or something that's defendable because of operational need, then we've got an abuse of power, we've got an abuse of a system here. And I don't know if any of you know this, but there's a legislation that's just been enacted that employers who have 25 or more employees must now have a policy that explains when, why, and for what purpose they are monitoring. And monitoring electronically or monitoring, right? So please remember that, and hopefully we don't have too many creepy spying employers in the city of Ottawa. I'd like to think not. All right, let's go to the next one. Survey says there's now a right to disconnect in Ontario, and let's see what we're voting on. Well, is it a complete fantasy, except 24/7 work hours, work weeks? Stop bugging employees, it's off hours? Completely depends on the nature of the job. Ooh, that's an interesting one. Employees are just lucky to have a job. Okay, so I think we've got a pretty clear winner up here. So it depends on the nature of the job. All right, so who wants to talk about that? Who wants to tell me why you chose that answer? All right.
They're responsible for the facilities that they manage 24/7.
Right.
Yes, they do have a right to turn off, but guess what? When you signed on that dotted line, you knew what you were buying into. You know that you're, the end of the day, the one that's responsible for that physical site. And if it means you have to make yourself available, you make yourself available. It is what it is. I'm HR. Guess what? Unfortunately, when you have multiple shifts running 7 days a week, I don't get to say, oh, please don't talk to me, it's Saturday. It doesn't work that way. Right. You have to be available when you're needed. And depending on the type of work you're doing, you're not going to have that, sorry, 9 to 5, it's 5:02, talk to me tomorrow. It depends the nature of what you do.
Excellent, thank you. All right, anybody else have a perspective on this? All right, we've got just right behind you. There we go.
Yeah, so I was in hospitality for 35 years, and I didn't work more than 500 days in my entire career because I loved the job. So when I was in Quebec City, I used to have a pager, and the pager went off, and I'd be halfway between the hotel and home, and I'd have to decide to go to a phone booth or not. Today, I'm going to get a complaint here, and I'm no longer in the hospitality industry. I'm going to get a complaint that room 517 didn't have a coffee maker, right? Because the guy who I've hired is a newbie.
Right.
So I agree with it depends on the job, but people today don't have time to put their mask on, right? We learned that this morning,
Right.
the leaders. So that's kind of a debating point. We could talk about it over wine.
Thank you. So you know the term the right to disconnect. It's not actually a right. So you've just given us some examples, but it is legislation that's put in place by the Employment Standards, through the Employment Standards Act, that requires employers who have 25 or more employees to have a policy about how employees can disconnect, right? So we've got folks who work to the point of burnout potentially, right? Where they're still connected while they're on vacation and or still connected while they're on a leave. And, you know, different hours of work, we've got flex work. And so when do you actually get to separate work from rest and rejuvenation time? And the policy does not require employers to provide a broad right to its employees to disconnect. What it does require the employer to do is say, when can you breathe? And when might we tap you on the shoulder and say, excuse me, but maybe you haven't taken a break? And maybe you should disconnect while you're on vacation. So maybe we're going to ask you not to be on, and we're going to tell all your colleagues not to contact you while you're on vacation, right? And it puts in place also different ways, different uses of technology, turning off notifications and things like that, that allow employees to understand that it's okay, that you shouldn't feel guilty about actually taking a vacation, taking some time off, and disconnecting. But there is quite a bit of confusion around the term the right to disconnect. That is not what the legislation says, but it does require employers to put in place measures to help employees be able to take some time for rest and rejuvenation. All right? Any other perspectives on that before we move on to the next one? All right, let's do this. What's the next one? Quiet quitting trend is a thing. I'm liking what I'm seeing. All right, so don't quietly quit, loudly quit. You want to quit, you're fired. It's a new term for an old problem. It's justifiable given this pandemic mess. All right, we got some interesting perspective on that one. I'm sure we've all had a moment where we were feeling like we needed to quietly quit during the pandemic, and maybe that was okay given the disruption. All right, new term for an old problem. All right, let's get some perspectives from the audience on that. Help me understand what you mean by new term for an old problem. Anybody? Suleen?
Well, just referring to Stephen's presentation this morning, where he said this is something they've been addressing for decades, frankly, and it's just got a new bent to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anybody have any other examples? No. I happen to agree with that, and it also poses an additional challenge for leaders in terms of how are they actually engaging with their teams. All right, let's keep this moving along because we're getting close to time. Next one. There is a fixation on workforce generations and baby boomers are finally leaving. God help those Gen Xers keep it together. Oh my God, millennials have grown up, or maybe OMG, because I might fit in the Gen X category, just saying. Gen Y now has a bad rap, those suckers. Okay, are we gonna hit a tie again, folks? Are we racing between Gen X and millennials? I think millennials are gonna win. While we're watching these scores come in, and for once, millennials are winning. Right? For once. Okay, so what are your perspectives on the fixation that we have, the continued fixation that we have on the generations in the workforce. We heard some of it this morning, earlier today, but tell me what you're seeing as it pertains to the recovery from the extreme disruption that we've just come out of. All right, we've got somebody over here.
My take would be to be patient, because a recession might slow things down, but we have 10 years of transition between baby boomers and early retires from Gen Xers. So our great resignation or our talent challenge is going to take a break, but it's not going to go away.
Oh, brilliance. That's absolute brilliance. I 100% agree. So this talent crisis that we've been experiencing, right? You're bringing people into the organization who have less experience than the people who have left. You've got to factor that into your onboarding program and to your resilience at your leadership team level or whoever's doing the mentoring and the training. Because it's going to take long. We need to be patient. It's going to take longer, and we're under pressure. So there's a bit of a perfect storm happening there, and we need to think that through. So that's excellent. I think we had somebody else over here.
Hi, I'm Katrina at Ottawa in the co-op department. So I thought I'd share what is happening for us at co-op, and I'm sure my colleagues at the other universities can share. We're having a cohort of new students coming in who've graduated from high school remotely and have not had that summer job in person. They haven't had in-person interviews. And so this past work term, we're planning right now for the winter term, we have actually in-person interviews. We have employers coming on campus. And what I found was a light bulb moment that I think is important for all of us as a heads up of what's coming or is here now. Students don't know how to handle it. They don't know how they're coming in, how do I dress, how do I approach this new potential employer? Do I put my hand out? Should I say thank you? Should I bring a printed? So these are all what's coming up the pipeline or down the pipeline, whichever you want to look at it. So just a thought in there as we mix the different generations and the experiences that they've had. So we're thankful for those employers coming in on campus. I've heard some employers even say, I'm just coming here to give these students some of this experience of having an in-person interview, because with the hope of having hybrid or back in the office. So.
Outstanding. And think of that when we're making decisions around hybrid or fully remote models, right? What does that do for the onboarding and the mentoring of the folks who are new grads? Did we have a question over here? Yeah. Or an example? Yeah.
Yeah, Helen Spence, top 60 over 60. I just wanted to say that the fixation on generations is harmful.
Yes.
That in fact, what we have is more in common with the various generations than differences. And the media and everybody, is perpetuating this stress.
Friction.
Yeah, between generations, among generations, because we're only going to have more generations moving into the future. So I couldn't answer that question because I don't feel that it represents reality.
And that's an excellent perspective, right? So think about we're in a talent crisis, right? And how are we inviting the different generations into the workforce, and in some cases back into the workforce, right? And what are we doing to create that warm welcome for the different generations coming in, rather than being divisive, rather than being focused on that? How might we see greater benefit to the mix of the generations? So thank you for that perspective. That's excellent. All right, let's go to the next one. I'm going to try and keep on time before Michael takes that cane and pulls me off. In the pandemic, leaders are making snap decisions, and I've got whiplash with sudden change in directions. What do you expect during a crisis? There could have been more consistency. It's not bad. It shows flexible leadership. Ooh, that's an interesting perspective. Well, it's not bad. It shows flexible leadership. Ooh, managing in a crisis. Tell me something about that. What are your perspectives on the choice that you've made in the voting. Anybody want to share? Let me talk a little bit about managing in a crisis.
I think the reality is that, this was an unforeseen event.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have management teams, senior management that did have to turn on a dime. Were all the decisions, little pennies from heaven? No. But again, it was a live and learn moment, and I think you've got to take it all with a grain of salt. There are things that we could have definitely done better, but there's a lot of things that employers did do right, employees did do right, and you've got to, we always focus on what we did wrong. I think
Yeah.
this is one of the areas we have to focus on what was done right, and that was working together to try to make your ops happen,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. There was no roadmap, right? There was no roadmap. We were in a crisis, and managers had to take a top-down approach in some cases in order to keep the wheels on the bus. So exactly the right thing to do. Now, as we're turning the bus, we need to get out of the crisis management habit and get into the collaborative, consultative habit that we might have unlearned just a tad because we have been in this crisis management mode for an extended period of time. So that's a bit of a watch out point now that we need to consider as we're moving forward. All right, last question. Back to the office often brings social awkwardness. Your take on that? Yeah, I've been living in my basement like a troll. People need a chance to warm up to each other. It's going to continue with hybrid work, and young people don't even know how to shake hands. Oh dear! I think we're going to get a few votes on that one. All right, so looks like the votes are in. People need a chance to warm up to each other. So can you share, in closing, what you're doing or what you know other people are doing that's pretty innovative in order to allow people to warm up? I mean, today being in person is spectacular, right? This is likely not the first in-person event that you've had, but I remember the first few that you had. I know I had to warm up to it. I felt a little socially awkward, and I'm usually at these things all the time. But what are you doing in your organizations? Maybe if you could share a couple of examples that's allowing people to warm up to the idea of having a little bit more in person. And maybe we can celebrate and share some of that great knowledge. Anybody? Oh, we've got somebody over here. Microphone on the way.
Hi. I don't know that it's innovative, so take it for what it's worth, but we are a group of people who naturally sit around the kitchen table. So we break bread together, we sit, we have
Love it.
lunch. Derek said it in his panel earlier. There's lots of room for water cooler chat. There's lots of room for chit-chatting. One of our most senior executives will interrupt everybody's afternoon, and we have snacks. I mean, we're very food motivated. We're essentially
That's
raccoons.
good. Many of us have been food motivated throughout the entire pandemic, just saying.
But some of our most natural collaborative stuff comes out of the organic meetings that we have. And then because we've had these really positive experiences, people are more willing to come and have a natural conversation, which leads to more. So it's exponential growth that way.
Always, always. Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? We've got somebody at the back.
Hi. So we're a group of software developers, so we actually lean into the awkwardness of social interaction. So we do two things. We have this thing called Full Side Fridays, and we basically take turns and sometimes volunteer people to present, but it's a presentation on their hobbies, and the weirder the better, right? So we've had presentations on how to make chainmail, and how to distill your own tequila, and those kind of things, and really lean into, kind of show us who you are, and there's no embarrassing, and because everybody's got some embarrassing hobby. And then the other thing, being food motivated, every week we do this wheel of food where we take people's pictures, we stick it on a big wheel, Sometimes the pictures are either their profile pictures or we'll secretly capture their on video, on conference pictures in some awkward pose.
Gosh.
So again, we'll spin the wheel and we hand out expense budgets for just whatever you want on food. And then people get a chance to share it the next week. So, we had somebody spend $50 on bulk bar and candy and, took pictures. And so, we really encourage the weird now that everybody is, because those are the moments where people can be a little bit authentic and be a little bit vulnerable and share. So we're just trying to create that inside a virtual environment.
Awesome example. Thank you, and great one to end on. Thanks for playing along, everybody. It's been fun.